Hello, I'm Alan Furstenberg,
And I'm Mark Tucker, and we are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Hey, Mark, I have an idea for what I'd like to do this week.
Okay.
We talked a couple of weeks back about some of the new tags that were available in SSML for the Google Assistant.
Yep. And thank you for those additions to Speech Markdown.
Right. And I started putting some in, but while I was doing that, I kind of wrestled with one of the tags and kind of the best approach both best approach from a design and from a technical point of view on how to implement it.
Okay.
And I thought, let's take some time now to talk about it.
That sounds good. Yeah. No, let's do that.
So the issue, broadly painting the issue, the tag that I didn't implement was the voice tag. And as people might remember from our conversation a few weeks back, what the voice tag does is it literally starts playing the audio, the generating the text to speech using a different voice. Now, on the Alexa side, Alexa takes one attribute, name, and that name, as I gather it, needs to be one of the predefined named voices that's available in Poly. Did I get that right?
So they've ported or connected or whatever they've done, at least a certain number of Poly voices to Alexa, and you can use those by name.
Okay. And those names, just, again, kind of to be clear on it, and I'm reading through
Matthew, Joanna, Ivy, Brian. Yeah. And depending on the name, it also, I guess, the name goes along with a country. So, Brian would be an accent. Nicole would be Australia. Russell would be Australia. Brian's Great Britain. So depending on what name, then you also infer a country.
Okay.
Which would be an accent as well.
Okay. So language or locale, or I think it's what XSML tends to refer to as a language.
Yeah. Okay.
So the first thing I realized in kind of approaching this was, well, okay, Google supports the name tag, the name attribute for the voice tag, but it's got a totally different set of names. And their names are, to be blunt, not names. They're mnemonics. They're referencing the type of technology that was used to generate them and the country code and an arbitrary letter.
So like FRCA WaveNet B?
Right.
Exactly. My good friend.
Right.
French Canadian WaveNet B.
Right. And that's, from there, you don't even get a sense of what the gender is. You don't get a sense of anything.
Yeah.
Okay. So kind of my first thought in how to approach this would be, okay, I ignored this problem completely. I just put in the name attribute and I let some poor developer figure out what, if they're porting between the two, they need to change the name themselves. So that's certainly one approach, and that would have been easy. But since I actually wanted to use these as well, that became not implausible, but it became frustrating.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. And to be honest, that was one of those things, like at the time only Alexa supported voices, and so I did what was the easiest thing at the time.
Right. It makes perfect sense to do. It's a perfectly reasonable approach.
Yeah, and just kind of also a little bit of history generally on Speech Markdown, because it's a markdown of SSML, and SSML is XML based, and you have begin tag, end tag in SSML. I was trying to get away from that, and particularly what I was trying to do on the voices was kind of think of a script where you could have a tag that had a name, a section of text, another name, a section of text, and then a tag that was like, go back to the system or go back to, voice, voice A, so that you could kind of in your in your Markdown make it look a little bit like a script. So that's kind of, behind the scenes, kind of what I was thinking on how I approached it. I purposely didn't want to do nesting, and I didn't want to do a lot of attributes. You do support the language tag as well on voice, so that you can do, voice name is Brian and then language, and do that weird thing where, Brian is UK, but maybe you want it to speak English, like it's got a,
Well, I think the example that I always love to give is, try to pronounce French using an American accent.
That's a better example. Yeah.
So it's gonna be the right, CHAT will sound sort of French, but an American speaking French. So it'll be chat, not chat.
Yeah.
So and I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to do it, and kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to get voice working and using it myself. So the next option I thought about was saying, well, okay, we have a bunch of predefined voices that are Alexa voices. Why don't I just take those same names and map them to Google Assistant voices? So you could specify a Google Assistant voice name and it'll work great. Or you could specify an Alexa voice name, and on Alexa we'll use the Alexa one, and Google will map it to some Google one.
Okay.
And there's some merit to that. Part of my hesitation about just going and doing that was, one of the things that I kind of like about Google's approach is that they specifically don't use names. And that's an intentional design decision. So I paused and kind of hesitated, and then thought some more. And then I realized that one of the things that Google offers that Alexa doesn't is they provide 3 additional optional attributes. And they say these are optional, but if you don't specify a name, at least one of them is required. And those would be the gender attribute, the variant attribute, and the language attribute. And gender and variant are standard. Language is kind of a mutated version of the SSML standard.
Okay.
But basically, if you specify all 3, that maps directly to one of the predefined voices. So I'm thinking, well, and there are some advantages to doing this as well, because now you can just say, for whatever language you're in by default, whatever your default language is, give me male variant number 1 or female variant number 2. So I kind of like that notion. And then I said, well, okay, now what if I could do that and then map those to Alexa ones? So somehow I specify this set of attributes, and it will pick one of the Alexa voices based on that. And then if Alexa ever someday supports it, we just directly implement that. And I like that idea. That seemed to me to be the best approach. And then I tripped up on how in the world to implement that as part of the parser.
Oh, yeah. So, please, if anybody is a parser expert, please join us. I would even let you rewrite the whole thing however you want as far as the parsing goes. I picked the Mina parser because that seemed to make sense to me. Just a reminder, I graduated in management information systems. I did not go the CS track. Well,
officially, I did go the CS track, and Mina makes sense to me, but I still wrestle with it sometimes.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that it's without fault, and I don't know if like a custom built parser would be better.
Yeah.
So I'm open for having somebody rewrite that that portion of it, but
it also kind of goes to the language that you use, or that you've chosen to use. So, for almost everything else, nothing else requires more than one parameter. I don't think you've got a single other markdown tag in there that requires an actual parameter. At most, it's a tag, colon, and a value.
So, yeah. And so there is a part of me that still wants to have that be kind of not like a written rule, but like a, strongly, suggested guidance.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
But so I've got another option. I don't know, maybe you thought about it temporarily and dismissed it.
Go ahead.
But the idea that I thought of back at the time where I was like, okay, well, what happens when, because I did think a little bit about it. I didn't like just totally blindly, didn't think that, one day that you'd be able to change voices. I figured that would be something that would happen across platforms. The idea being that if you come from a web background and you do HTML fonts, you can specify a number of different HTML fonts separated by semicolons in the order of, if it supports this, then use it. If not, then go to the next one. If not, go to the next one. So that was kind of the idea that I had, was that you would take those voices in whatever language and use that. And then I'm like, well, what if, it turns out good in this case that Google doesn't support like a name like Matthew as the name of one of their voices. But if they did, then you'd have to look at some sort of a prefix, like an AX Matthew, because like Matthew and Alexa could be US, and Matthew and, some other platform X could be, British. And that would be, completely different depending on, what you were wanting to do. So that was kind of the idea that I had. But that, once again, that would be changes to the parser as well to now support some sort of a delimited list of names as part of your voices. So it'd be like voice : Brian, in quotes, semicolon, FRCA,
Right.
WaveNet B or whatever, right?
Right. Well, there's also kind of a hybrid on the second one, which is where we define this mapping.
Yeah.
Is we let users define aliases themselves.
Yeah. That's true. That could be an options in there where you could say voice 1, voice 2, voice 3.
Right.
And then you could map, say, when the platform is X, then voice 1 is this. And when it's, yeah. And there are definitely parameters that you can set, and that has been, slightly used. But you could definitely expand the list of arguments that are available that you pass to Speech Markdown and then gets passed off to each of the different platforms as it's parsing it, and it could definitely do that. That's
an option as well. So
that is an option, and that does have the added advantage where, like, if you were doing something and you were assigning characters, like you were having Zeke is on Alexa platform is Matthew's voice, and on Google's platform is such and such voice, then you just refer to it all over in your Speech Markdown by the name. I kind of like that better than the font fallback approach.
I like that idea. The more I think about that, though, I almost make that a brand new tag. And the reason why is it kind of goes to something else that Speech Markdown does very well. And that's that it maps some of the Markdown tags in different ways. So, for example, the whisper tag on Alexa, it directly maps it to the whisper voice characteristic, who's the right term I forget, I apologize.
Yep.
But on the Google side, you have it mapped to something slightly different because Google doesn't support the whisper characteristic. So I might almost, create a new tag called character, or I don't know, character is the first name that came to mind, following along your idea of making it look like a script. And then you could define the characters and the different characteristics of it. And by default, those characteristics could be voice, but it could also influence things like the prosody, the pitch, various other elements that are controlled by different tags.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that comes to mind because that's how I do it on multivocal. Except there I do call it voice.
Yeah.
But I don't want to overload voice. I don't want to overload voice too much here.
Yeah, and I yeah, I don't know. I'm wondering about that because I think maybe we could use voice, like reuse voice, and then just have some smart override. So like if you do Brian or whatever, and there is nothing
In your character map?
in the mapping of your options, your config mapping for that, then it would just, and then I don't know that I might have done this. I'd have to look at my code. But like have a list of valid names or like supported Alexa names.
Right.
So each platform.
On the Alexa side, there is a list of valid voices and the country they go for.
Okay. So yeah, so I could see adding that same like list of valid voices to the Google implementation, and then check to see if what you've passed in is a valid voice. Check to first see if like there's a configuration override.
Mm-hmm.
If there is no configuration override and you say Brian, then check to see if Brian is one of the supported names on Alexa, because you're currently checking for Alexa and it says yes, so go ahead and use Brian. If it's not, if it's you're actually on Google and Brian's not listed among one of the valid names, then it has some sort of other smart override or something.
That makes sense. I like that. So, okay. So we overload voice to do not just, well, no, okay, but that's fine. That just means that in the generator, in the generator for each platform, it needs to do that. It basically has two branches. One is if it has a user-defined name in it, then use the tags and attributes from that user-defined name. And if not, use our own.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And that way actually that means that on the Google side, you essentially use the same table, an internal version of that table, to map Alexa's names to a language, gender, and variant.
You could.
And have that, so it just kind of naturally falls out that way. I like that notion. And this way we don't have to define a bizarre protocol for specifying gender, language, and variant.
Yeah, kind of simplify, and part of the purpose of Speech Markdown is to simplify things. And so, it does give you the ability to use all of the tags, but, use some of the defaults and make the defaults or like the most used easy to do.
Right. Right. Well, what this does is it means that, by default, if you're just, trying to use voices, those would work. If you want to very precisely define voices to, this variant with this prosody change,
yeah,
then you can do so. Or, this variant with an emphasis tag thrown in, you can do so.
Yeah.
I think that would work.
Yeah, I think that would work too.
Okay. So I will start pursuing that.
Now, what I do not know is sometimes the parser still has like problems. Your names are going to have, well, I guess that's not, you're never going to be passing one of the Google names as part of one of the voice names. Is that what you're saying? Or
maybe, I mean, well,
maybe you could, and that may or may not have problems with the dashes.
That may have parser problems. So I need to make sure that the name.
But maybe it won't, because the language tag has like en-gb.
Yeah.
And so maybe a dash or hyphen whatever is something that
is acceptable in there. And I'm not sure offhand what voice. Yeah, looking through the code, it's difficult for me to figure out exactly what parameter it is expecting. It's okay. So I'll fiddle with that and see if I do run into problems.
Okay.
Give that a try. So I think that's a reasonable approach.
Yeah.
So in the generator, so let me take a look at the generator quickly. So right now on the generator side, when it generates voice, yeah, it literally just adds the SSML tag and the and those attributes. So I'd be able to map it almost exactly the same. So that's a pretty straightforward code addition for the user generated names. I think that'll
plus a really cool feature now.
Yeah. And it dovetails beautifully with multivocal.
Great. I like that.
I get to change even less code.
That's even better. Well, I do appreciate you going in and doing a pull request. I need to jump in and go through, and I've got a number of PRs that I need to go through and evaluate and merge through and push out changes. So I just haven't had the
time. I know.
Trust me, I know.
I mean, it took me weeks in between when I discovered this to even get around to start looking at making sure that I could do this in Speech Markdown.
Yeah.
So,
well, and to be honest, time is one thing, but energy level has been a challenge the last couple of weeks. Just things have been kind of overall. I'm doing fine. I'm not, but. Just I guess maybe a comment to people out there. If you're going through a few days or a week and you're just not, things are tough. Things are tough out there. So practice some self-care and talk with people. It has been a long week for me, but I was really looking forward to talking with Alan today and digging into some code I haven't looked at for a little while. And so just do what you need to do.
I was going to say, and I think that's important, is, part of self-care, it differs for every person, but it's important to know the things that you enjoy and be able to do them and be able to set aside a little bit of time to do them and enjoy them. If you like coding, and I think both of us enjoy coding, our pet projects are the things that we like to do. Make sure you take some time to do that. If what you like to do is read or listen to music or whatever it is, make sure you take that time, because that's recharging, that's energizing in some ways.
It is.
And definitely, if you're really, really feeling stressed out, talk to somebody.
Yep. And I found, social media has been a, positive and sometimes a negative side of things, but there are a lot of people that seem to care genuinely about one another and just want to do things that are nice, even though some of these people I've never met in person. So just really appreciate the kindness that I find out on the internet as well.
No, definitely agree. There are some great people out there, and if you don't know them, reach out to Mark and I, and we'll talk to you. We're happy to.
Yeah, we definitely are. So this has been great. I love, we haven't done a kind of a coding, design session together. This has been fun.
No, I think this will be good. I hope we'll do some more of these in the future.
Well, now I look forward to what you figure out, and I'm definitely open. If you hit something that's a snag, I'll jump in and do what I can to help you try to figure it out.
Yep. No, now that I think we've got a roadmap, and I think we've figured out some good approaches. From there, it's just figuring out the details.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
So hopefully in a few weeks, hopefully when this airs, we'll be able to talk about how this feature also goes live at the same time. Hopefully.
Yeah, let's hope so. I think I already do have it on my list of things to get to, and so hopefully this weekend I'll have some time to do that.
So we look forward to hearing people's feedback on this feature, on Speech Markdown in general, and we'll talk about this another time on Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Take care, Alan.
You as well, Mark. Have a good weekend. Hope you do better.
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Just it'll be good to have the weekend come.
Take care, everyone.
All right, bye.